The morning sunlight spilled across the polished marble floors like a spotlight meant only for people who were never supposed to struggle, never supposed to fall, never supposed to worry about the electricity bill or the cost of bread. But Aria Navarro didn't belong to that world. She belonged to the world that cleaned those floors, not the one that walked over them. She had arrived at the towering Belmont executive residences with trembling hands and her sister's uniform folded carefully in her bag, praying no one would notice she was pretending to be someone else. What she didn't know, what she could never have prepared for, was that stepping into that penthouse would collide her life with a man whose world was collapsing behind glass walls, a man who hadn't smiled in months, a man who didn't know he needed someone like her more than oxygen. And the moment she walked into his silent, sunlit apartment, destiny shifted in the quietest, most irreversible way. If you believe in kindness, new beginnings, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your support helps more emotional stories like Behind the Vault Doors, a quiet bond between two women. Lesbian love reached those who need them most. Aria tried to keep her thoughts straight as she slipped into the cleaning apron her sister Lucia usually wore. Lucia had woken up sick, feverish and dizzy, whispering apologies because she couldn't afford to miss another shift. Aria didn't think twice. She took the bus, showed the ID card that looked close enough to pass, and walked into the building like someone who belonged. But she didn't. Everything was too quiet, too bright, too luxurious. Even the elevator smelled like roses and possibilities reserved for people with degrees, not those who had dropped out to work double shifts like her. When she reached the penthouse assigned to her sister, she knocked once, softly, then entered when no one answered. The space was breathtaking at first glance: high ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows glowing in warm daytime light, and gentle traces of life scattered around. But something else lingered too. A heaviness. A stress that clung to the air like unspoken grief. She noticed children's toys left near the sofa, some papers scattered across the dining table, and a coffee mug left untouched as if someone had held it but never found the time to drink from it. That someone appeared moments later. Kellen Rourke, chief risk officer of a major tech security firm, stepped into the room still wearing yesterday's exhaustion in his eyes. He looked like a man who had forgotten how to sleep. Tall, sharp-featured, with sleeves rolled up past his elbows and a phone constantly vibrating on his wrist, he barely noticed Aria at first. But when he did, she felt the weight of his gaze, a gaze that carried storm clouds and quiet apologies for things she never knew. He nodded at her presence with distracted gratitude and walked into his home office, leaving a trail of anxiety behind him. Aria began cleaning with careful movements, trying not to intrude on whatever silent collapse this man seemed to be going through. The apartment wasn't messy in the traditional sense, it was messy the way someone's life becomes when they're trying to hold everything together for everyone else while falling apart themselves. She dusted the shelves, folded blankets that had slipped off the couch, and picked up a small drawing left on the floor. It was a crayon sketch of a little boy holding hands with a taller figure, his father, most likely. The colors were bright, but the drawing had a lonely softness, as if the child spent more time waiting than playing. Not long after, Aria heard small footsteps from the hallway. A boy around 6 years old appeared, rubbing his eyes with tiny fists. This must be Milo, Kellen's son. His hair stuck out in soft tufts, and he wore pajama shorts covered in cartoon rockets. He walked with the cautiousness of a child unsure whether laughter still had permission in a house filled with shadows. When he noticed Aria, he paused, unsure of who she was, then simply nodded politely and went to pour cereal into a bowl too big for him. Milk splashed, cereal spilled, and she stepped forward quietly to help without saying anything. He looked up, surprised, then shyly stepped aside. Aria didn't speak because she wasn't supposed to. Staff usually kept conversations minimal. But the boy's small shoulders and quiet movements tugged at something deep inside her. Memories of helping raise Lucia when their parents left. Memories of mornings where she made cereal alone because no one else would. She wiped Milo's tiny mess and gently slid the bowl toward him. He gave her the smallest smile, the kind that could crumble the strongest defenses. As the morning unfolded, Aria worked with a gentleness that soaked into the walls. Kellen came out again, this time talking to someone on his phone, stress making his voice low and tight. He spoke about budgets, regulatory deadlines, and risk exposure. But in between those business-heavy phrases was a faint tremor, the sound of someone stretched too thin. When he finally ended the call, he leaned his forehead against the window for a moment, breathing heavily, as if he had forgotten what it felt like to be a human with limits. He noticed Milo eating quietly and immediately softened, though exhaustion still clung to him. Arya witnessed a silent exchange between father and son, Kellen's guilt, Milo's longing, both trying their best and both falling short in ways that weren't their fault. She turned away respectfully, but something about the scene tightened her chest. As she moved room to room, the day revealed more pieces of the Rourke household story. A photograph of a smiling woman on a shelf. A wedding ring placed carefully in a box. A child's birthday card with only one parent's handwriting. It didn't take words to understand. They had lost someone recently enough for grief to sit in every corner, long enough for life to demand movement despite frozen hearts. Arya didn't know how to fix grief. She wasn't even supposed to try. Her role was simple: clean, leave, and hope no one questioned why she wasn't Lucia. But life rarely obeys the rules of job descriptions. In the early afternoon, sunlight warmed the penthouse with a softness that made everything feel briefly possible. Arya was in the living area, wiping the coffee table, when she heard Milo quietly struggling with his shoelaces on the floor. His small fingers trembled with frustration. He kept trying, pulling one string over the other, failing again and again. And Arya couldn't help herself. Without breaking silence, she knelt beside him and gently took over. Milo watched her tie perfect loops, his eyes wide with gratitude. Something changed then, something invisible but unmistakably real. A thread formed between them, delicate but strong enough to matter. Kellen saw the moment from the hallway. He paused, watching a stranger offer the kind of soft presence he had been too drained to give lately. Something in his expression cracked open. He wasn't angry. He wasn't threatened. He simply looked relieved. And scared. And deeply aware of how much his son needed warmth and how much he himself had forgotten how to create it. As the day passed, Arya finished her tasks, but she stayed longer than required, partly because Lucia needed the income, partly because something in the air called her to stay. She reorganized the cluttered kitchen drawers, calmed Milo when he spilled juice, and helped gather fallen papers from Kellen's office. Each small act wove her more tightly into the fabric of a household she didn't belong to and yet strangely fit into. Near late afternoon, an unexpected power outage flickered through the penthouse. The lights dimmed, the electronics powered down, and Kellen cursed under his breath as his unfinished report vanished from his laptop screen. Milo whined softly, afraid of the sudden quiet. Arya moved quickly, opening the curtains wider, letting streams of daylight soften the uncertainty. The apartment brightened naturally, making the space feel warm, human, alive. Milo drifted toward her, comforted not by words but by the steadiness she carried. For the first time all day, Kellen sat down. Not because he wanted to, but because his body finally refused to keep pretending. He collapsed onto the sofa, elbows on his knees, eyes closed. Arya hesitated, unsure if she should quietly leave or continue working. Then Milo climbed onto the sofa beside his father and leaned against him, small and tired. Kellen rested his hand on his son's hair, but his shoulders still shook subtly, the kind of trembling that comes from exhaustion mixed with unspoken heartache. Arya looked away, but the image carved itself deep within her. She finished her task slowly, giving the father and son space, yet staying long enough to ensure the home settled into a calmer rhythm before she left. When she finally stood near the door, gathering her things, Kellen opened his eyes and looked at her, not with suspicion, but with a kind of quiet, complicated gratitude. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence held enough. As Arya stepped into the hallway, she felt something shift inside her. She had walked in pretending to be someone else, but she walked out feeling more like herself than she had in years, a woman capable of helping others not through money or power, but through understanding, patience, and unexpected kindness. The elevator ride down felt strangely emotional. She didn't know if she would ever return. She didn't know if she should. All she knew was that she had stepped into a stranger's life and found pieces of her own heart reflected back at her. Maybe fate didn't always announce itself. Maybe sometimes it arrived in spilled cereal, untied shoelaces, and exhausted single parents who needed someone to steady them.